Are you a person with a disability in BC looking for career opportunities? Whether your disability is visible or not, BC Partners in Workforce Innovation can help. We streamline the process to connect you to the right opportunity with inclusive employers we recruit for, and our referral process helps take away the fear, discomfort, and stigma of disclosure. We collaborate with you, your employer, and other supports to identify ways to remove barriers to set you up for employment success. Visit findmycareer.bcpartnerswin.org and begin to explore your career options.
Welcome back to Discover Stories on Reimagine Radio. Again, I'm your host, Graham Wyman with the Disability Foundation. Again, if this is your first time on Reimagine Radio, please like the video and subscribe to the channel as it does help with our reach. So we are joined again by Alex Carey. Alex, thanks again for joining us today.
Hi, thanks.
And we are also, again, joined by Bryden Vino, the VAMS program coordinator. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Great to be back.
Yeah, so just continuing on, we were talking kind of the different accessibility levels and specifically what Naughty Dog was doing and the advancements they made with The Last of Us 2. But now we'll kind of go more into kind of the controllers. And Alex, Microsoft has put out an accessible controller through Xbox. Have you personally used this controller? And if you have, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the mechanics and how it works.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Xbox put out a device called the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which is a very cool piece of technology, and see if I can explain how it works nicely. So what it is it's a little rectangle with a bunch of 3.5 millimeter jacks in the back. So the same type of sort of jack you have for a pair of headphones. And each one of those jacks is connected to what you would think of as like a button on like a standard controller. So A and B and X and Y and all the triggers and all that stuff. So every single one of those buttons has a corresponding 3.5 millimeter jack.
Okay.
And then what you can do is take adaptive switches or buttons or joysticks or literally anything you can think of and plug them into those, and then they can act as a input device for that corresponding button within a game. So if you have trouble, say, pulling a trigger on the back of a controller, you could use an Xbox Adaptive Controller, plug in something into the right trigger, slot, and then be able to have a more accessible, more sort of tailor-made solution to be able to interact with that. So that's like the really broad version of it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, how long has this been on the market? The reason I ask is I've seen that on, if you know, but I've seen it, and Brendan, you might have as well, in the Assisted Technology Lab at GF Strong Rehabilitation Center. And it's always intrigued me, and I had no idea that this had even come out until seeing it up at GF Strong.
Yeah, so that's a great question from my friend, Mr. Google. I'm not sure if you've met him. So Mr. Google says September 4th, 2018.
Okay.
So it's been out for a little while. I do own one. I'm still at a point with my disability where I'm able to use the standard controller fairly comfortably. But it's part of my disability that I have something called spinal muscular atrophy type 2. It's a degenerative condition. So every year I get a little bit more tired and a little bit weaker. So it's, I guess, comforting to me to know that there are tech solutions already out there that I will still be able to game even when my disability progresses, that this thing that I love and care for so much is still going to be something that I can participate in. That gives me the warm fuzzies.
Yeah. No, and it'll be interesting. I'm going to go on a tangential this time, but and this question isn't in here, but how do you think VR will help revolutionize accessible gaming?
Yeah, VR is really interesting. I am a bad game developer where I have still yet to be in a VR headset. I'm a little worried because one of the weakest muscles on my body is my neck.
Okay.
So I'm kind of worried putting a big, heavy thing on my face. I'm just going to sort of fall over.
Right.
So we'll see. It is definitely on my to-do list to get in and see if it is an accessible experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of thinking it won't be within my lived experience and my disability. I'm not sure if that's a thing I'll be able to do, but I think in general, it'll be, revolutionary. It'll be a huge step forward for the industry in being able to communicate experiences to people, right? One of the things I know I don't know enough about this to speak well on it, so I'm going to do it anyway. I know there can be problems when designing in VR, but moving around in spaces, or if you're in a VR thing, like your height changes, right? Like if you're standing or sitting or like moving around, like you can get like motion sick if you try and like walk around or whatever. Like there's all these design problems you're trying to accommodate for. So I think the thing that could be really interesting, and again, I don't know anything what I'm talking about, I'm going to say it anyway, is if you had the protagonist that you're playing as be in a wheelchair, I think would be a really interesting way to do VR because you're sitting and you can roll around sort of like tank controls while still being in VR, right? So I think that's something I'm sure someone has already, have a very cool prototype that exists for this kind of idea already. But I think there could be an interesting area to explore to work around things like motion sickness and like, if I walk around in the game, eventually I run out of space. So
true. That's interesting though. Yeah. But it does all go back to the creating experiences that you couldn't have in your regular day-to-day, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Before I ask this next one, I'm just curious a tiny bit more about the adaptive controller for Microsoft. So like you mentioned, say you can't pull the right trigger, right?
Yep.
That's right on the back. And you can map a new button to it. Could it be like as easy as just like another like A button? Or
so
okay.
Yeah, it can be. So there's two things. So this is not the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So there's a thing called remapping, right, where you can switch what buttons on the controller do what. So that is a solution that sometimes can work without having to have a hardware solution worked into that, right? So let's say the game says right trigger does, shoot, but you can't push right trigger. Being able to rebind that to a face button or to the D-pad might be a solution to that without having to get into any hardware-related stuff. But sometimes controllers can be using all of the buttons, right? So if you move something to a button, you have to move something else somewhere. So everything needs a home to be able to play the game, right? So that's where something where the Xbox Adaptive Controller can be helpful, or people with more severe or limiting disabilities where maybe they have very low motor function, or they may be someone like an amputee, where having a much more flexible option, the hardware is a better solution then. So there's sort of like two things. I realize I didn't answer your question super well there.
That's okay. Simply, it was just, can you use a face button or like,
yes.
Like with the adaptive controller in placement of the trigger?
Yeah, so you can do that. But I think the easier solution to that exact problem is remapping rather than the hardware thing. So you can just do that in a standard controller. The Xbox and PlayStation, even the Switch now, thank God they put this on the Switch, allows you to move what buttons do what. So an example of this, what you just talked about, is like Breath of the Wild, Zelda Breath of the Wild, had a thing where pushing in the right thumbstick had you, go into stealth, right? So you like crouch down in stealth. I can't do that. So I ran into situations where you need to be able to stealth to get horses because you have to sneak up on them. and I can't get the horses. So I just wasn't doing that. I was just running around and climbing everywhere. And then then I realized pushing down on the D-pad calls your horse, but I can't call a horse because I don't have one. Right. So it'd be nice if I could just swap those things, because I don't need to call a horse if I don't have a horse. Right. So I literally just want to push in the right thumbstick to be down on the D-pad, and I just want to swap those things. That's it. That's all I want to do. So they let you do that. I was like, yay. But then the problem that runs into is it swaps all of the inputs for those two things. So if you do something like the photography mode and zoom in, which is forward on the D-pad, you can never zoom back out. So all of your photos are up people's noses because you can't unzoom, right, which is really annoying.
Fair. Interesting. Again, yeah. I'm sure there'll be a solution to that in the...
So the solution to that, so what the solution that they have right now is what's called system level remapping, where all the inputs are swapped, right? Okay. What you want is game level remapping, where the game itself just says, okay, I want stealth to be this button, and then every other instance of it in the game stays the same way, right? And what currently, so the game doesn't have remapping, but the Switch does, the console does. So it's sort of like a Band-Aid fix to the thing. So hopefully Breath of the Wild 2 has system level remapping, because it will make my life easier.
So, okay, so kind of next question here kind of ties in as well, but pretend I'm some new game developer. What would be, and I'm coming to you as a consultant, right? Maybe I'm coming to Playability. And what are like the top 2 or 3 like accessibility standards, things that you would suggest to be in a game?
Yeah, so readable subtitles, nice big font, black background, adjustable transparency, that kind of stuff. Rebindable inputs is another one. And then like if they have dialogue subtitles in general, I think that's almost been standardized at this point. I can't think of a game that doesn't have that, but you know, sometimes it does happen. Mm-hmm. So those are sort of like the big 3. It's like readable subtitles, that they exist at all, and then rebindable inputs. Mm-hmm. And then it gets, you know, there's lots of secondary things, but those are sort of the big 3. I think there's a couple others, but my brain is slowly being fried by my increasingly toasty room here. So
yeah, the readable subtitles, that's a big one, because I always play with them on, just because. I mean, there's so much stuff happening in a game that sometimes you can't even hear the dialogue because, like you said, maybe there is a big explosion happening, or right, and you just can't hear what they're saying, or like it's too low of a frequency on like one of the male voices, so you can't really hear it in your living room. But one thing I've noticed is like hardly any games have the ability to like scale up the size of your subtitles.
Yes, yeah, for sure. That is a thing. Also, scalable UI. As well, right? Where like if you have a mini map or something and you have low vision or some type of blindness or that type of, you know, vision barriers that you may face, having the ability to just make things bigger is really helpful. Right. When you brought up a thing that I'm just going to go off on a tangent on. So there's this idea within inclusive design of temporary and situational disabilities. So it's the idea basically that, you know, you don't have to be what you think of as like classically disabled to benefit from inclusive design, where, you know, if you have a noisy room, it's nice to still hear what people were saying in dialogue. So you turn on subtitles, which would also help someone who's deaf, right? You know, or you're in a noisy train, or you're playing a game on your phone, and you want, there are options that exist where you go, oh, that helps a bunch of classically disabled people, but that also helps me in this situation, right? Like say you want to game with one hand, right? And you're holding your coffee, you have your phone, right? Maybe you turn on a one-handed mode and play your game on your phone or something, right? There are a number of examples like that. I can't think of good ones right now, but just the idea of situational and temporary disabilities that also like play into inclusive design practices, helping more than just what you think of as, classically disabled people.
Well, it's certainly funny how with the advancements of accessible gaming, it feeds into so many different areas of just gaming in general, whether you have a disability or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think inclusive design and accessibility, helps everyone. Inclusive design is a thing that, if you make big readable subtitles, if someone's watching TV on their iPad or something and has the volume way up and doesn't have headphones because they're an inconsiderate jerk, then you can still, watch or be able to follow the story they're playing. Like it's not just for the disabled. I need a shirt that says that.
Yeah.
No, that'd be a good one. Now, this is just one thing maybe you might give some insight, but do you have any interesting or funny facts about, things you may have learned while designing games or just in general around accessible gaming?
Yeah, so I'll tell a story that happened, and I don't remember exactly which version of the game it was, but so one of the Dooms, I don't remember which one, put out a colorblind option for the game, which turned out just to be a filter that visualized color blindness. So it just turned the screen the same way someone who's colorblind would see it, rather than actually making anything colorblind accessible.
Oh no.
So that's the one where I sort of go, this would have been very easily fixed if you checked in with someone who had color blindness and had a barrier to this. So that's sort of the sad head on desk story that I like to point to, because I think that's a major component for making things accessible is working in partnership with people with lived experience in barriers that they face, right? Like having people who are visually impaired, who are hard of hearing and deaf, right? Who face strength and dexterity barriers, having them help you plan or help you test or help you validate the work you've already done, to make sure the things that you're making actually are benefiting people with disabilities, right? Like I think that's a key step there. So that's something I know at Playability we're hoping to work toward and push in the industry is having the people with the disabilities participate in those systems. There's a saying, and I believe the disabled advocacy circles of nothing about us without us, which is something I think really rings true. Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, you kind of mentioned like the VR not being quite where it needs to be for accessibility, and then same with like the rebinding from system to game level. How do you see like any other ways accessible gaming evolving in the future? And maybe like what do you hope to see?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is I just hope it to be easier as someone who does some game development sort of as my day job. I hope it's easier for developers to implement. Right. So it's less work and doesn't have to be a whole thing that you have to do. So some of the more often used engines are Unity and the Unreal Engine. There's lots of them, and some are proprietary and all this stuff. But having those engines have accessibility out of the box, so rather than every person who's making a game have to make rebindable inputs, have the game, have a pre-existing framework for you to start with. Have that front and center within the engine itself, and have developers have the tools to do this easier, which I'm hoping is starting to happen. But it's one of those things that, hopefully we'll get there, and the tools will be easier. Because I think if the people that make software are real lazy, if something's easy for them, they'll do that. So if it's easier to put the accessibility in than to take it out, well, they're gonna do it. Just make it easier to do it than not do it, and then it'll be fine.
Right.
I'm not. Don't come at me. You'll work very hard, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like if Unity or like Unreal Engine, if they did come out of the box with the rebindable options, wouldn't that actually just already like take less time to make games now? Like,
yep.
However long it takes to like do that kind of thing on the front end of making the game, but like, yeah, it seems like it would just be a lot faster, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially each game has its own, design challenges to overcome. So, there's always some amount of specificity within a game that needs to be made. But like, yeah, having a template to start from, or even like, so there's like, I know when you are Unreal, there's like project files that you start with when you open it up, and there's like, a first-person controller. So it's like a rigged up model with a dude with a gun that you can like walk around and shoot like boxes, right? So what I would love is within that type of sample project, there was literally a UI section that's like, and now if you want him to move rather with W and you can change it to Q or whatever, it just does it. So it's there, and the assumption is that it should be there rather than a thing we have to convince people of, which I think it is getting better. I know, more games than not are doing that, and AAA is putting a lot of work in, because that takes a long, the more team and production, the bigger the boat, the longer it takes to turn. But I think they're getting there. Yeah.
I got one more actually, and this is kind of more personal, but what are you playing right now, and like what's your favorite game right now?
Yeah. So I picked up Mario Strikers.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I've been really enjoying that. I never told I don't know if I ever told my origin story. So I am a sports nerd. I love me some sports video games. I have, I don't know if I still have it, but I had a copy of Rugby 06, which I was like, I didn't know that existed, but I had it. So I really enjoy sports games, and I think Mario Strikers was like one of like, it's arcadey and fun, but it's just really good. So I've been playing a lot of that. I believe it's made by Next Level, which I think is based in Vancouver. So that's pretty cool. Locally made to our neck of the woods. Yeah.
Nice. And any all-time favorite game?
Oh God.
That's a tough one, I know.
Yeah, I'll pick a pretentious one that people may not have heard of. Thomas Was Alone, which is a platformer about being a little red square that made me cry.
Oh wow! Okay.
I'll have to look into that one.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little game.
Nice.
All right. Well, Alex, I just wanted to thank you so much for being with us here today. And as always, very interesting what you had to say about gaming. And looking forward to seeing what advancements are also going to be made in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much. Is it cool if I plug my stuff?
Yeah, no,
please.
Heck yeah. So yeah, if my rattling on about weird game stuff has got you interested in games, feel free to check out Sacre Bleu. You can wishlist it on Steam. That's SACRE space BLEU, hopefully, because my French is bad. And if you happen to be a game developer that's looking for accessibility feedback on a project you may be working at, you can check out Playability at play-ability.net.
Alrighty. Well, thanks again. And Bryden, thank you for your time as well. And again, to our listeners, if you have not yet, please subscribe to the channel. Alrighty, you two take care and have a great rest of your day. Get help discovering your career path in customer service, electronic assembly, retail, food services, and more with adult education programs at Douglas College. Our instructors work directly with you so you get the attention you need to succeed. Through work placements and one-on-one training, you'll graduate with the knowledge and skills needed for today's workplace. Learn more at douglascollege.ca/vest. That's douglascollege.ca/VEST.